either way. So anyway, folks, we're live, everybody. Welcome to Founders Focus episode 34. I have to say, I'm really pleased that we're bringing back this series on a weekly basis. It's one of my favorite things to do, one of my favorite work things to do for sure, to have conversations with recruitment technology entrepreneurs who have been so annoyed at something they've seen in recruitment that they have thought, you know what, instead of complaining about it, I'm actually going to build a product and solve this problem. And it's been fascinating to have this type of dialogue. If you go back in history of all of the previous 33 episodes we've done, you will find that every entrepreneur has a different story, a different journey, even different characteristics, different behaviors. And I think it's really inspirational for all of us who observe that and think, you know what, maybe one day you want to start a company, or maybe you want to do something yourself that is outside of, you know, directly being a salaried employee. There are many different types of people who've done this and many different ways to do it. So welcome to the show, everybody. Really pleased to see everybody. Today, I'm delighted to say I'm inviting on my great guest, who I don't actually know the title of anymore, because we got some like special news to announce as well. But let's go with David Rivel. He is certainly the co-founder of a company called PathMotion. But I believe today was actually a big announcement, and there's been some big brand changes and even a kind of a different role change for you as well, David. So welcome to the show, and let's start off with that. What has happened with PathMotion? What is going on?
Good to be on the show, Hung, and thank you for inviting me. So big news today. PathMotion is rebranding as Clinch, so that's extremely exciting news. So PathMotion platform will actually be Clinch Employee Connections, and we're going to be part of a number of modules that Clinch is offering to the market. So being able to add more value to our clients and customer is great news. And I'm going to be leading Clinch for the European region, which means I'm still going to be in charge of what used to be called PathMotion and is now called Employee Connections, on top of the other modules of Clinch that we're going to push to the market.
Fantastic stuff.
So that's the news.
I saw the update 2 hours ago when you pushed the news out. So it's really great that we're able to kind of share with that celebration. So fantastic to see it. I'm a little bittersweet whenever I see an old brand like that I used to have some positive engagement with kind of fold into another brand. Of course, I knew Clinch as well from previously, so it makes it easier that those two things are going together. But in terms of how that works, I mean, from a CEO's perspective or a founder's perspective, is there any emotional feeling that you have towards sort of the end of this brand and the start of the other? What's your thoughts on that, David?
Of course, there's emotions, but they're all positive. They're positive also for the future. To be honest, if you take a step back, one of the reasons we decided to go and sell our business to the PageUp Group is because of the complementarities we saw with the Clinch product. So Clinch and PathMotion are a natural fit, and hopefully we're going to cover that in more details maybe as the show goes along. But as you might know, Clinch is essentially an intelligent careers website that basically captures candidates' data and does marketing automation, like actually a number of players in the market. And PathMotion, now Employee Connections, brings the content to the Clinch machine that can then be dispatched to the right people at the right time. So PathMotion, as you know, is a platform where candidates can actually ask questions to employees. Employees respond to the questions. That creates a lot of authentic and unique content that is usually not available on careers website. And so the kind of wedding of both products makes a lot of sense. And, this is a very exciting time. We're in a full honeymoon period and looking forward of doing lots of children together.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. I think there'll be, for people who don't know, by the way, PathMotion back in the day.
And Hung, to do the parallel, it's like, when you get married, I mean, now it's either the man or the woman will change their name, but they're still very excited about the future. And that's exactly how we feel. Or how I feel, at least.
That's it. I mean, I think we let's continue with the marriage metaphor, man. We'll beat this one to absolute death to make sure we keep going. But what is interesting for the audience is that basically, again, the PathMotion content is pretty unique because it is in kind of this, it's not marketing content. It's literally Q&A content that's produced by interaction from candidates and with the employees of that company. So you can imagine if you're landing on a careers page and you're navigating around and the Clinch product identifies you're interested in this type of thing, then they're going to serve you some interesting content from the employees themselves that are talking on this particular area. Think about how powerful that is. If I'm a software developer, I'm on the careers page, navigating around, I'm spending a lot of time on the back end type of jobs, whatever. Then I get served a notification, say, hey, did you know the head of engineering is talking about this? Boom. That is something I think is pretty unique in the market. So very, very powerful combo indeed. David, let's kind of rewind back for a second because there is a kind of a moment for everybody's side of career when you start off, where did the entrepreneurial idea first emerge for you? Were you always going to be a person that was going to set up a business? Was this the journey that you had planned for yourself, or did it just kind of happen as a result of just circumstance?
I think it was always in my genes because my parents and my grandparents are all entrepreneurs. They didn't found tech businesses, but they were self-employed basically. And, I remember my grandfather telling me, better earn whatever, $1 for yourself than 10 for someone else. And it was kind of the philosophy of how I've grown up basically. So I always knew I wanted to set up my own business. I think I've always had the entrepreneurial fiber, and I nearly did it, a few times before, PathMotion. But I think I had a bit of pressure to show that I could get the nice corporate job and that I could get the, nice diploma. And once I had ticked those boxes, I was ready to make the move. So I used to be at the time, I remember working in consulting with BCG in London. I was dating my girlfriend at the time, which eventually became my wife. She's based in Paris. And if she's listening, big kisses to her. I'm sure she's not, but never mind. At least I can say I spoke about her. Anyways, I'm diverting here, but at the time we dated for 2 years. She was in Paris, I was in London, and she told me, time's up. Either you come to Paris, either you come to Paris, or what it's gonna be. And obviously, I chose to come to Paris. It was the time for me to quit my job and found PathMotion with a friend of mine. And we basically tried to solve a problem that kind of we experienced as candidates, right? It's not really a problem that we experienced. It was more like, as a candidate, I've always chosen places I wanted to work at based on the people I met. People had a huge influence in me choosing to go somewhere. And I realized that when you speak to people in jobs, you really get a sense of what's really happening from within. I was very passionate about giving career advice to young people. And this is the advice also I gave to people. I told them, go for coffee with someone in this company. If you're interested, you'll get a feeling of what it's really like to work there. And eventually realize that those young people didn't have the network to have access to those people. And that's how basically the whole idea behind PathMotion came about. And my co-founder had a very similar story. So, at some point we decided to, go for it.
You know what? That's so insightful because when you talk, but this is obviously true to anybody who has looked for a job. It's the people that matter most, and that information is simply not available. Usually, it's a marketing document or it's PR up front, or the recruiters, and I'm not hammering recruiters in any way, but recruiters have to present a particular image of a business, and it is not necessarily what the case is when you arrive into the organization. So
and they don't always have the information because they're not living the job day in, day out. It's tough for them to know why the tech team decided to shift from language A to language B, right? So there's so much information they have available, and when you speak to people in the job, obviously they have the insights that's missing, and they bring the credibility to it as well, obviously.
And it increases the trust factor. If you're a candidate and you're looking for a brand, brands can be damaged very easily online these days, as we've seen. They could also be artificially inflated as being amazing, also very easily. So you can't really trust that information that you see. You want to be able to interact with who's actually doing the job, because they're more likely to give you what's going on. And give you a sense, as you say, it's a visceral sense as to what the atmosphere is and how working there is going to be like.
Yeah, those are the authentic stories we promote so much. So it's funny, we did a study a few years back now with a leading neuroscientist. So obviously we have KPIs to prove that it works, but it's a bit intangible, right? Employer branding, it's always kind of, how do you measure success? How do you prove that you're impacting people and increasing conversion rates, which we're able to do to date for the KPIs. But we wanted to show whether there's a scientific proof, whether there's something basically in your body that makes you react differently when you speak to real people in the job. And so we basically did a quite comprehensive study with a leading neuroscientist based in the US, where we had 70 students in his lab. And what you measure basically is oxytocin release in the brain, heartbeats. This is called like immersion levels. And the students were spending 1 hour on the website of one of our clients and 1 hour interacting with the employees online of that same client. And basically what we found out is that when they interacted with real people, their immersion levels were 20% higher. So today we know scientifically that there's something in your body happening when you actually speak to real people versus reading institutional and corporate material, which is usually quite, scripted and vague and not specific and less trustworthy, as you mentioned.
I love this research. Is it publicly available?
It is publicly available, and the guy doing it is very interesting. He's got a TED Talk. Actually, you can Google him. He's called Paul Zak. Paul Zak. He's a storytelling guru. So he usually works on the consumer side. So he's the guy who's going to assess, Coca-Cola's advertisement for the Super Bowl. Should I do ad A, ad B, ad C? What's going to work best? And it's quite fascinating because it's not always intuitive. And for a few years we were quoting him, and then we thought, okay, why don't we do a study with him on TA, see whether this whole concept of storytelling works in talent attraction. So for 2 years we kind of bombarded him with emails. I think at some point he just got tired of us and he said, okay, who are those guys kind of just bothering me? Let me talk to them. And he liked the idea, and very kindly he offered his time for free to do that, to conduct that study with us. And
that's
yes,
amazing.
It's on our website.
I would love to check it out. If someone can pull this out and share it in the chat or in a thread somewhere, that would be amazing, because I think people would love to see it. I really like getting into the biology of TA. It's like because we talk a lot about values, we talk about all of these things that seem to make sense, but we struggle to evidentialize that, in the sense that what is actually happening with the people? How do you actually know? Like we get the impression that's the case, but if you can actually start measuring like the chemical content, the biochemical sort of reactions that people are having in their brains as they're interacting with different things, that for me is rock solid evidence that this is it produces something totally different. And
by the way, that's why so many consumer brands are investing into storytelling, right? We know it's more engaging. We know it's better remembered. We know it creates a relationship with the people telling you the story. So you really identify yourself with the people. And that's why in consumer marketing, you'll see a lot of kind of, storytelling used as a technique to convince people. And it's just adapting that technique into TA. And we do it in a certain ways. Obviously, there's different ways to do it. But, letting your people kind of participate in that exercise works really well.
Well, this is the difference between just straight up storytelling, because that could be just a person in marketing writing a script, which is what's basically generally happening. But in this circumstance, it's actually the live interaction, probably on Zoom or something, or some sort of call, right? Maybe a telephone call or whatnot. But that interaction basically is immersive. And that, by the way, is something we shouldn't forget. If you're speaking to a person in person, or you're doing something that is clearly one-to-one, then that is something that is very difficult to be distracted. If you are distracted, it's very rude. If I started, looking at my phone and stuff like this, you would get that, right? And you'd think, why am I applying 100% attention to this guy who's spending 80% attention? And you'll start zoning to 80%, and I'll start saying you're eventually having a negative reaction. So immersion is the key.
And maybe just to clarify, like the platform that we've kind of developed is all about one-to-many. So obviously we listen to candidates. So that's also very important, because it's funny how a lot of people speak about the candidate experience, but no one really listens to them. So, we are all about saying, okay, why don't you listen to what your candidates want to know, let them ask the questions, and then produce content based on that. And once you've responded to those questions, so it can be via text or video, it can be live and not live, we've got both. We then make sure that the content being produced by the employees is disseminated across the recruitment channels of our clients. So it's basically embedded into job descriptions, into the career website, it's SEO optimized, it's easily shareable on social. And we know today that the war for talent is really a war for content. So if you can basically build content that's unique, authentic, you're going to differentiate yourself from the pack, basically. And this is really the concept that lies behind employee connections. Now, the beauty is that with the Clinch machine, we are able to get lots more data about candidates, what they want, what they look, what's working, what's not working. And Clinch is fantastic in doing marketing automation and dispatching that content to the right people at the right time. And this is why the combination of both products makes so much sense.
Yeah, I totally can visualize this. I hope everyone listening to this can visualize it also, because it is a very powerful machine. Obviously, it's going to take some time. The integration is something we should talk about in a minute. But once it's purring, you can absolutely see the value for the end customer, because you can start producing relatively cheap content, by the way. When you're doing when you're answering a question, or you're asking employees to answer a question, they don't necessarily need to have a huge amount of productization there. They simply have to respond. That's easy content production, but it's the most important content that is served to the candidates at the end of the day. I think this could also be applied very easily internally for a big organization as well. So right now we have big corporates. BCG, classic example. I'm sure there's a wiki in there. You can go and search for stuff, and it's a very text-based manual, drag institutional information out. But wouldn't it be great if there's a way in which you could pitch a question in and then surface back like responses from other employees? Say, yeah, it's like this. And then the overall intelligence of the organization just gets massively reinforced. So I think where you guys are on right now is a very exciting path. It just opens up many more doors that previously we didn't even see. We didn't even see that this was, as you say, a problem. David, going way back, you mentioned, I love the fact that I didn't realize, but I love the fact that you come from like a family of entrepreneurs. That seems to be, I wouldn't say it's a pattern, but it's one of those things where I think there's two things. Number one, there's maybe a genetic inheritance there, which can help, there's certain personality traits, but there's also this sense of an example. Like you say, you had the advice from your grandfather. It seemed like a very important moment where he pulled you to one side and said, David, here's something you need to know. And it was like, boom. Lots of people who don't have the grandfather who's an entrepreneur would never have that conversation. So they may then follow a different path as a result of this. So I guess where I'm leading to here is, how do you feel about this concept of providing, kind of democratizing this sense of exposure of opportunity, exposure advice, making sure that everyone has the opportunity, we equalize the opportunity a little bit more to get into new fields or to start new businesses and what have you. Do you feel that this is something that recruitment should do, or do you believe that that's something that, let's say, outside society needs to take responsibility of? Or would you say that's actually not an issue at all, because, different people are going to do different things and not everything is ever going to be equal?
No, I mean, first of all, I don't think that it's because you come from a family of entrepreneurs that you should be an entrepreneur. I think that at the end of the day, it goes back to the very basic sense of you should do something that you feel good about doing, right? You want to wake up in the morning and feel good about what you do, and it doesn't matter whether it's entrepreneurship, it's having a good job, it's working in a charity, whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter. I think the ultimate goal, of life is to be happy. And obviously, you need to be happy in your personal life, but professional life is taking a big part of your time. And you should find something that just makes you happy, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. And whatever example you may have, because it's, again, you shouldn't just follow what your parents tell you to do or what they did. Now, the truth is, when I started, I think, maybe entrepreneurship was a bit less democratized, but I think in the last 5 to 10 years, it has become nearly a hype, and everyone needs to become an entrepreneur. And I don't think that's good either, right? Not everyone should be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is hard, it's risky, it's painful. It's done for a certain type of people, but it's not done for everyone. I don't think that recruitment per se has a kind of a duty to, do anything around that. It's, as you say, it's more society at large. And I think that today, we're nearly in overhype about entrepreneurs, to be honest. So, that's
very interesting. No, and the democratization is being carried through technology, isn't it? Like the ability to build products. Obviously, that's since the rise of Web 1, that's been an exponential decrease in terms of the amount of effort or resources required. And even further now, you look at things like generative AI that's emerging. Suddenly, that might be your marketing department, could be your sales department, could be whatever it might be. And then suddenly you realize, it's becoming easier and easier for a single person to launch something and DIY the whole thing. And then you think that's okay for some people, but as you say, it requires certain types of traits or certain types of risk profiles that make sense. And other types, it's not that way. And even life moments, right? It's not the best idea, for instance, if you've got a load of dependencies around you, for you to take a radical risk. That doesn't make sense if there's a safer option out there. Let's go down to the traits of entrepreneurship that you think you have, David. You look at yourself, a bit of self-awareness, you look yourself in the mirror, you think, okay, these are the things I do well as an entrepreneur. I'm going to ask you the question later, what are the things you don't do so well? But let's do the strength side of it. Do you know what you do well as an entrepreneur and as a leader, and what are those things?
That's a tough one.
You can say everything. It's like, hey.
No, definitely not. Far from it, actually. But I think that what I do well is that I'm tenacious. And I think it's probably a very important character trait. I don't let go. So I like to carry stuff until the end and make them happen, even if it's difficult. I can be beaten up many times and still kind of get back up. And again, I think it's also a perspective I've learned from my family. My family, went through the Second World War. They lost a lot of people. And whenever I have a difficulty, I'm like, okay, just take it easy. Like, you're healthy, you live in a country that's in peace, at least for now. And, you shouldn't complain and just carry on and make it happen. So it's also that positive attitude. I think I'm very positive, generally speaking. I see always the upside, which is sometimes dangerous because you do sometimes stuff that you shouldn't be doing because you don't see the downside. But that's another maybe character trait. And then finally, I guess I care about people. I really enjoy spending time with my team. I genuinely care about them, their problems, their challenges, their happiness. And I think that helps in keeping a team aligned to you for a long period of time, even if you go through important challenges.
Yeah, really, really great advice. Let me just unpack all of these things because I think the people who are absorbing some of these conversations are really keen to understand, what the entrepreneurs themselves say. Number one, tenacity. I think everyone would agree that's the case, but it's very interesting that you contextualize that with some of the family history that you had, and that gives you a grounding. It kind of allows you to understand, what, you need to zoom out of your problems sometimes and then just contextualize it properly and understand that whatever it is you're doing, there's people in my direct lineage that have got far, far worse, like exponentially the other way. So it's not to say that your problems are insignificant. It's just to say that, what, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the biggest thing that could happen. And in fact, tomorrow's another day in your life. You can get on with this. Do you think that without that adversity in the background, it may actually weaken someone's tenacity? So in other words, if they didn't have that adversity either as a person or with their immediate family where there's an example, do you reckon that can sometimes be damaging for someone because they, a small problem becomes actually the problem and they can't move on? What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't like to generalize. Like, again, everyone is different. I think you have examples of great entrepreneurs who come from families that didn't have any issues, and you've got entrepreneurs who come from very different backgrounds. So I don't think I would say that, but I think I would say that it's important to always ask yourself, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, and if you're not going to die or you're not going to get sick, it's okay. As long as you feel at peace with yourself and with the friends you have and with the people around you, it's okay. You don't need a big house. You don't need you can forgo, in fact, a lot of things in life. And I think it's important to never forget that. And I think it helped me a lot along my journey. Maybe the fact that I have, this family history helped me, but I don't think it's a critical piece. I think you can learn to de-zoom, as you say, without having that background, basically.
Yeah, you can train resilience for sure. And it may be something, it'd be interesting to know whether leaders or people in HR ever think about doing that. Like, we all talk about, hey, we need resilience. Okay, have you got a training plan for that? Do you know how to create the confidence in the person to be able to get over problems quickly, or not be, completely paralyzed by an unexpected blockage? Like, sometimes you get a problem and yes, there's a problem, but you can't sit there and just think about the problem. There's other ways in which you can get around it, get through it. What is the method?
And that's what the leader needs to do with his team, right? And it happens sometimes in my team as well. They come to me and they say, okay, it's a catastrophe. Like, we have this huge issue. And yes, it's an issue, but you're like, okay, take it easy. It has happened 10 times before with hundreds of different people. And, we can solve that. Don't worry, and let's work through it together. It's having that, as you say, that reflex of adjusting your brain and your perspective to not take things maybe sometimes too personally and remove yourself from the situation. And, just to say, what, it's okay. Again, I'm always, what's the worst that can happen to you?
Do you know I've got a technique for this. I'm not sure anybody else shares this idea, and it's not my idea. I read it somewhere, right? But I think the value of failing often is exactly this, because every time you fail, you kind of learn a lesson. It wasn't that big a deal that you thought it was. Yes, you don't want to deliberately fail. You want to put full effort to succeed. But if you experiment enough times, inevitably you will fail. And each time it's a little bit of a blow, and then you think, okay, it's it's a blow, but it's not devastating, and you can move on real quick. And that's kind of the help we really do it.
100%, 100%, and that's what I think we try to also tell to our kids, right? We'll never be angry at you because you failed. We'll be angry at you because you didn't try. Just try it. And that's obviously, you know, how you learn and you get back up, and you also get used to take hits, and you feel like it's okay. I can take it, and I can get back up. I can learn from it. The key though is to learn from it, right? You don't want to take the same hit 10 times in a row, because if you don't learn from it, then I'll question you. But if it's a first time hit, it's okay. Just make sure you get back up, you learn, you adapt, and you continue in life. And it's like that with everything. It applies to work, but it applies to personal life as well. It applies 100%. To, you know, for the single people who are listening to us, with, you know, going out to a person that you feel attracted to. It's okay. You know, worst case, they'll say no, but at least you know, and you'll move to the other one. And next time you do it, you'll be much more confident, and you'll be able to, you know, maybe convert better.
Folks, this is why I love Founders Focus, man. Like, would you ever expect you're getting love and dating advice from a tech CEO? But here we are. David just laid it on you, man. It's laid it on you. This is great, but it's exactly that. It's understanding that there's a risk. The risk always feels bigger than it really is. I mean, most of the time we're talking about most of the things that we do in our day-to-day, in our work, in our personal lives, the risks are actually a lot smaller than we think, and the reward is usually a lot bigger than we think. So, you know, go ahead and do this. Skipping to the side, the third thing you said, David, you mentioned that building relationships, being around with people is really important for you. You genuinely, you know, you're not faking it. You genuinely want to be around these folks. But then you've identified that from that sort of behavior, it's actually strengthened the relationships with the team. And you believe there's a collective resilience as a result of your interest in them. Now, would you say that this is due to just your natural kind of nature, your behavior, or do you think that, you know, there's other CEOs that won't do this naturally? Do you feel that this is something like leaders need to develop? Like, how important a component is it to, you know, build these relationships with team?
Both. I think it's both. I think obviously, you know, for me, I think it comes relatively naturally. I enjoy being around people. I enjoy helping them solve their problems. And actually, I actually am not afraid to do the problem solving for them sometimes, which can be good or bad, by the way, because obviously you want to learn people to fish and you want to fish for them. But I'm a doer, and, you know, sometimes I have, you know, one-on-ones with my sales team, and they're like, oh, I couldn't reach that person. I just pick up my phone, dial the number, and just get the person on the phone and unlock the situation for them. So, but it's something I think you can definitely learn. If you know that it's important as a leader to do, and that it has an impact on your team, you can, again, you know, get techniques to kind of get used to, you know, train yourself to do it. Obviously, if you enjoy doing it, it's better, because, again, it's more authentic and people will feel it. But I'm sure that, you know, if it doesn't come naturally, it's something that you can definitely develop and do. And once you see that it kind of results in positives for the team, I think you'll start enjoying doing it as well.
Yeah, excellent. David, no person's perfect. Now, we need to ask you the area of, like, being a leader that you feel you're not particularly good at. Two questions related to this. Number one, what is that thing? And number two, how do you, as a business operator, deal with that? Do you try to get better at this, or do you know, avoid doing that activity and get someone else to do it? Like, what's the policy? So what is the thing, and what is your policy?
I guess it's always like the other side of the coin of what you do well, you know. So when I said, you know, I like to do stuff, I'm a doer. Sometimes, you know, I should, you know, restrain myself from doing stuff and basically spend more time kind of putting processes in place to enable people to do stuff. And obviously, I'm trying to do that as much as I can, because I'm very aware that sometimes, you know, I jumped too quickly, too fast.
So
that's definitely probably one piece of it. And there's the other aspect about the tenacity, which is like sometimes you need to fail fast. But as I don't like to fail, I keep on going sometimes maybe for too long, and I should probably accept to, turn around more quickly and accept that it's a failure.
Okay, really, really important question, that one. Because there's a great deal of entrepreneurship that is fail. They take too long to figure it out. And this is typically first-time entrepreneur. They're spending a long time doing this thing. And then, year go by, 2 years go by, they're still doing it. And the cash burn is bad. That the morale is down, etc. That's not where you want to be. So how do you deal with it? Do you just put a hard deadline to say, you know what, I'm like an irrational deadline that's unrelated to the work? You say, like 6 months, just make it up. And then
that helps a lot. We went through the situation, when we founded PathMotion. Let's be honest, like we had the first product, which was actually quite different from what we have today. And we spent like a year and a half building it. Very complicated product. It was a B2C product, actually, where essentially candidates could be matched to like-minded people.
Okay.
And, we took a year and a half to build it. We involved people in positive psychology. We did a whole machine, a whole engine. And then we launched and we're like, oh, fuck, like no one cares. So I think we've learned a lot from that. And, there's a lot of literature today on MVP and how you do that. At the time, and it's quite, that dates from, 2012, 2013. 2013, we were really kind of in a really bad spot. Went from 10 people to 2 in the team. We were like literally, out of cash. And I remember telling my CTO at the time, listen, don't develop anything. I'm going to go and I'm going to sell this new concept. If I don't come back with 2 clients in the next, actually we only had like 3 months left, I think, this is it. It's the end of the story. And so I went out pitching what is now Employee Connections of PathMotion. At the time, I pitched a Facebook app where basically people could talk to employees, but we're using the Facebook kind of text functionality. So it wasn't our own. And I was very lucky to land 3 clients. It was the NHS, Arriva, the buses, which is part of Deutsche Bank. So you see them a lot in the UK, and KPMG. And I came back to my CTO saying, okay, I've got 3 clients for you. It was all based on PowerPoint. We hadn't developed one line of code. So we went from one extreme to the other. And that's how we kind of got going.
Wow, that's a really interesting story. Again, I didn't know this. So basically you spent a year and a half basically R&Ding this thing, building the full thing, etc., threw it out there, landed like a damn squib. No one cared about it, understood it, etc.
Don't forget, I had a consulting background and my co-founder as well. So we had like 120 pages deck on the whole strategy and product features. It was ridiculous. And then we developed it, and exactly we went nowhere basically.
That's really interesting because obviously consulting is hugely important, hugely valuable, but it may be a different thing, like inherently different from this radical experimentation which tech startup is, because you've got to contact the market sooner. In fact, you've got to do that first before you build anything, right? So rather than
co-build, that would be my biggest advice. Co-build, like find a problem, expose your problem as soon as you can, and get your client to pay for it. If you're doing B2B, obviously, if you're doing B2C, it's a bit more complicated. But that would be like my big advice for anyone wanting to do tech B2B, basically.
Let's reiterate that because I think that's perfect. Co-build was what David said, and that means co-build with the customer. So you're not building it and then selling it to the customer. You're exposing the problem early, trying to figure out whether this is an issue and saying to the customer, we can build this for you, but we can do it off your roadmap, because they've got their own roadmap. They're not going to throw new things into it. It's already whatever. You need to be off. It's actually perfect for a third party to do it, and they may just give you some investment to get you started on that. That actually was what I would say. You remember when we first met, I was running a tech startup also, Workshape. Probably one of my biggest errors was actually not adopting the co-build strategy, because we had a really good conversation with a customer. I think it was Marks and Spencer at the time. Big organization who were wowed with the idea. Whoa, it's amazing. Let's go build it. And I said, no, I want to build a marketplace. And obviously it's like hardest thing ever, right? But now looking back, obviously with benefit of hindsight, I said, you know what? I should have taken 30K from them, or however much it was, built this thing out. And then from there, had case study, customer, etc., and then just giving the team generally more confidence to be able to push further forward. So yeah, that's a fantastic story. And the concept that you can kind of convert based on a presentation and an idea, and then some sort of a capability, and people might take a risk for you. So that's a really interesting piece of advice. Go ahead.
Yeah, but you need to be very pushy to be able to do that. I remember meeting those people at conferences, and I just would follow them until they agreed to meet me. And then when they met me, I was like,
this is happening.
You need to do it. Sign, please sign.
Yeah, that's it. Really interesting. And that I think is that tenaciousness is something that is unusual, and that may separate a great percentage of people, maybe successful at sales or successful at investment or raising or what have you, or just closing deals. Like, you need to push through the natural resistance that people have for whatever it might be. So that I think is an underrated quality. Okay, moving forward. David, you're French. You built PathMotion.
I'm Belgian.
Are you Belgian? Oh my God, I've just offended you massively.
No, it's okay. My wife is French. My kids are French. I live in France, so I guess I'm French to some extent as well.
Do people in France, do you speak with a French accent, or is there any difference between a Belgian accent?
No, I kind of lost my Belgian accent, I think, but people can maybe hear there's something very subtle, but they usually struggle to identify it.
So you can passively walk in Paris and no one's going to know, right? You're actually a Belgian. So but building the business in France, entrepreneurship in France, recruitment tech startup in France, how was that as an experience? How did it compare? Because I know you've got UK experience. You're obviously doing international stuff now with the wider group. How does it sort of compare regionally? Different countries building businesses. What are the pros and cons?
I think that France is completely underrated, and I'm saying that as a Belgian, right? So it's very important to say, like, I'm not chauvinistic about French people. I was grown up to more hate them than love them, but honestly, there's an amazing ecosystem in this country. There is a lot of help. You just need to be able to know how to navigate it. People think that, France is too expensive and too cumbersome, but if you know how to navigate it, there's a lot of aids. There's a great ecosystem. The French market is quite sophisticated to some extent, so we're having a lot of success, with employee connections in the French market. Sometimes even a bit more than the UK. I think in the UK there's probably more competition, which might explain this as well. But a lot of people were telling us, you're never going to sell employee connections, so what used to be called PathMotion, into the French market. They're going to be afraid to speak to candidates publicly. It's very sensitive. And at the end of the day, we had really fantastic success. We have success even with the public market. So we have the French Army, the Marines, the Education Nationale. So those are basically the teachers and the schools, the firefighters. So even the public sector is like a very kind of keen in innovating and being at the forefront of what happens in TA. So it's quite interesting to see that, perception didn't match reality. At least that's what I found.
That's really interesting, and we're starting to see great startups coming out of our French-speaking world, which is great to see. And I think a large part of it is absolutely this: there's a reality to some stereotypes, but none of those stereotypes are ever overwhelming. And if you have the right recipe in terms of the people on the ground, or the right really the right people, I think you've got a great opportunity of busting through. So
and amazing tech talent as well in France. Actually, there's a lot of even US companies. Facebook has an R&D center here. Obviously, you've got great engineering schools in France with a fantastic tech talent coming out of it.
Yep, absolutely, and it's usually undertapped. So yeah, I think, and again, my knowledge of French policy is obviously weak, but I seem to be aware, even in the UK, that there's some attempts to try and really encourage digital skills coming into France. So there's a movement there, which is great to see. So fantastic stuff. Let's talk about the wider market, David. Obviously, the world has been crazy times last 2-3 years. I think no one is like having a calm. Had a calm sailing over the last 3 years or so. 2023, obviously, again, we have these weird scenario. Start of the year, we were thinking, hey, this is going to be great. All of these people are now coming out of pandemic. We're going to spend tons of money. It's going to be roaring 20s again. Of course, we have a massive reset with the Russia invasion of Ukraine, which then cascaded into huge sanctions coming in, cost of living crisis, VC valuations going down, everyone thinking, oh my goodness, what's happening here? So looking into the future, where do you see the market generally, and how does that affect the recruitment technology space in particular?
So I think it's fair to say that we're going either for soft landing or for a recession, probably a recession in the UK, right? And maybe soft landing, or it's going to be close to recession in Central Europe. But that being said, the pressure on talent is still kind of extremely high. So there's such a gap between the talent available and what is needed that I think we would need to go through a deep recession in order to be able to balance that. So I think the need for talent attraction is going to stay there. I think there's going to be pressure on talent attraction team to work more efficiently. They always ask to do more with less. And that's obviously where technology comes into play. And where, obviously we encourage a lot of the TA teams to adopt kind of innovative technology, because in fact you realize that with technology you can become so much more efficient and you can do so much more without having to have more people on board. Whatever technology it is, obviously we encourage people to use Clinch, but I think there's a number of technologies available today that can solve a lot of the problems and the operational efficiencies that some of the TA teams are having without having to add more people to the team. So my take is that pressure on attracting candidates will stay up. And that recruiters and TA teams will have to become smarter and more efficient at how they work, basically, to attract as many people with a smaller team. And actually, it's funny because we speak a lot to TA teams, and they even struggle themselves to basically fill their own teams. And one of the big criteria for candidates entering the TA space is also kind of looking at the tools and the tech stack that you have available to make sure they get into an environment that's innovative and also, the products that are being used internally.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Did you see that survey I conducted last year where I asked a question to people like, what is your deterrent ATS? So exactly this question. So there was two questions. It was number one, it was if you could choose one ATS, what would it be? Not a free text entry, so there's no prejudice that you could just input it. And then the second follow-up question was, okay, if you found you had to use an ATS, which is the product that would cause you to say no to the job? And then again, free text input, and that data is available. So if you want to check that out and see what that looks like, it's right.
This is not the place to to badmouth anyone.
It's not the place to badmouth anyone. Although I can say, the mother company, if you like, PageUp, actually ranked very highly in that in the space. It wasn't the most popularly nominated either way, but it was overwhelmingly more popular than negative. In fact, I don't think there were any negatives. Negatives are obviously the big companies, because I think those products are never been optimized for our function. And they're always just a module of a bigger ERP type solution, and we just got to roll for what it is. So inevitably, it's going to be worse. Okay, really interesting, David. Let's talk about sort of the product. Big change today, obviously, with the rebrand. But in terms of the technical stuff that needs to happen and what people might, customers might experience from employee engage, right? How are
employee connections?
Employee connections, how are they going to experience the product in 2023? What kind of product innovations do you have down the pipeline for customers?
So definitely there's a big piece in obviously integrating the two products. That's going to be super interesting, and that is going to in itself kind of add a lot of value. Employee connections is still going to be like agnostic and can integrate into any career website. But obviously with the Clinch integration, the idea is to make sure that we basically connect the data to understand what candidates do and what they want to know, and then that we use the content created on employee connections to dispatch it to the right people at the right time to better convert. So that's kind of one big piece and the vision that we are seeing for moving forward jointly. But independently, Employee Connections also has its own roadmap and lots of innovations coming out. We just about to release kind of a video into our virtual events. There's a big push on video across the platform, making it easier for people to kind of record videos and then share it, and then obviously optimize it for SEO and wider sharing. But at the end of the day, it's all about also understanding the data better. We already have kind of machine learning embedded into the platform to really understand the topics of discussions. So we do it automatically. So we recognize the meaning of the discussions, categorize it for people. So it makes a better candidate browsing behavior, but also gives a lot of insights to our clients of what matters to candidates. And we want to take it basically to the next level in terms of really being able to then send content, to the people based on the questions they've asked, based on the profiles they view, and based on their browsing behavior.
Yeah, very, very cool, very interesting. And by the way, very exciting to see the increased push on rich media and video. It's very interesting to see, again, from the consumer level, how we are moving away from text more and more. I mean, did you see that report? I forget who it was, but it was someone who basically said, look, Gen Z are now using TikTok as the primary search device rather than Google. And obviously there's a reason for that. Number one, Google is still a desktop-based text inputter, whereas TikTok is mobile-based and is video input. And the sort of content people want to consume, the easier content is a video, someone telling them this is how it is, rather than, as you say, text which needs to be parsed and interpreted in your mind, and cognitive load is too high, and it's like, okay, what's going on? So
completely agree with that, but I would put a small caveat, because text is still important, especially when you look at organizations and employees being brand ambassadors, they're not always all comfortable doing videos. You need to still kind of offer that opportunity for people to answer questions by text. Doing a video takes a bit more effort, and what's also very interesting to note is that the type of things you say on a video versus text is sometimes not exactly the same. So when people are behind text, sometimes they are more comfortable sharing, stuff that they wouldn't by video. So I would argue they both work nicely together.
Yeah, very, very interesting insight. And you're right. Video is still there is a group that basically, again, down to personality. Certain types of people are very, very performative and they're happy to be on video, or maybe to perceive video as a nature of performance. And other people are quite reticent. I've noticed this doing Brain Food Lives and stuff like this, where some people do take a lot of encouragement. Whereas others, yes, bring me on. I'm happy to chat. So it's interesting to see how that then might turn into a character trait that maybe companies will actively recruit for in some way, because probably you will want individuals in future to be very fluent with, rich media communication. Take it to the next level, virtual reality, let's say in the metaverse. Like, you need to have people skilled in the metaverse at some point if it ever happens. So yeah, I'm basically reminded of back in the day, telephone era. I think you and I probably kind of traveling similar age groups, David. There were people who were great on telephone that never made it to the internet, I felt. Because their primary way of doing business or doing work was through the phone. And when slowly the phone moved to email and the communication was actually more on keyboard and stuff like that, they basically didn't acquire the same level of competence on the new thing. And I think they got left behind. So
100%. And I think today you need to be extremely tech savvy, whatever job you do, right? Even, not even, actually, it's quite critical as a salesperson, right? Today, if you look at the number of tools that even we are using, we're not like the largest company, right? It's just crazy. You have a tool, to find people, emails addresses. You have another tool to connect it to your CRM. You have another tool to do kind of outreach. And you need to be super tech savvy, in fact, to be fluid at using that. And we see it in our teams. Like the more tech savvy you are, the more you can actually do in terms of volume of activity, and hence get more meetings and more clients. And that's just on sales, but it's applicable obviously in marketing and any other function as well. So I totally agree with you that you need to constantly educate yourself and force yourself, even if it doesn't come naturally, to use the latest kind of tech stack, whether it's in recruiting, in sales, in marketing, to be able to keep up with our times.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, this year has been the year of generative AI, as I mentioned right at the beginning. And I think that recruiters kind of need to just be early adopting in this stuff. Because you will know that someone who's able to use, let's say, a text generator, they're going to be able to write blog copy faster than someone who doesn't do that. And then they can be a content machine. Someone who can use generative AI for images. Suddenly you don't have to spend time searching on Google for images. You can just create them. That are, basically free from IP, free from whatever. You can just go ahead, use them, put your brand on them, boom. That's recruitment marketing stuff that would take time. You'd otherwise have to send that to your design team. So there's going to be, I think your vision of what the next year or so is like, I think I would 100% agree with. Demand for recruiting is going to be high, but demand for recruiters will probably be leveled off in terms of numbers of people. We're just going to be asked to do more with less. And the only way we can do that is to use technology and automation to basically get highly skilled. The image that I have is basically, in future, so Air Force fighter pilots, it's going to be a case where it's a piloted plane, but they're surrounded by drones that can, it's called automated wingman, without wanting to use, military metaphor unnecessarily. But I see recruiters being that person. It's like you're the pilot of a machine, but you also need to have these automated wingmen that can just make you a significantly higher and more impactful person. And that's the way to keep your skills intact and to be a sort of marketable in any market. David, we're coming to the end of the show, so let me just ask you one more question for the budding entrepreneurs that might be listening to this now or in future. What is your one piece of advice that you could give to someone who's thinking of starting their own business? A piece of advice that you think is important and real for them to know.
Don't wait. Start as quickly as you can, and feel free to do it in parallel of whatever you're doing. So you don't need to make the big jump straight away. If there's something that you're passionate about and that you feel has some legs, you can today you can do a lot without having to commit to it fully. So I would say, just go and talk to people, start testing the waters, start even developing, and if you feel there's some next to it, then make the jump.
Yeah, that co-build, do it, and don't wait, by the way. That's key, because most people are waiting for the perfect time. I believe it's similar to having
There's
a
no
family or
perfect
whatever.
time.
Yeah, it's
There's
always
no
going to
perfect
be
time. It's
inconvenient. So if you sit there and
exactly.
wait and wait and wait, years will just go by. Just do it, because it's never going to be convenient. It's similar to DIY, you know, paint your damn fence, because there's never going to be a weekend where it's going to be perfect. You just got to go do it. Okay, David, come to the end of the show. What busy CEOing or leadership things that you've got to do for the end of the day? What's happening after this call for you, David?
Oh, I'll probably get a few phone calls from the team to help them unlock some situations. But other than that, yeah, I've got a few external meetings planned, and a client success team meeting today with the UK.
Amazing.
So, all exciting stuff.
Amazing stuff. David Rivel, thank you so much for joining us on Founders Focus. David Rivel, what is your new title now? It is the GM
Head
of something, I guess?
Head of Clinch Europe.
Head of Clinch Europe. Folks, go check it out. It's an amazing product that's going to stitch together a lot of the elements that we want to do. Candidates generally want to speak or hear from employees. This product is going to enable them to do that. David, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Hang. Pleasure.
Wasn't that great, folks? I told you it's my favorite thing to do for work. It is speaking to recruitment technology founders and having these types of conversations. I learned so much from these conversations. I hope you do too. And again, really important that David mentioned, you know, it is not about evangelism about entrepreneurship. It's not the right decision for everybody. But if you do have an idea baking away and you think, you know what, I want to do this, these are the types of conversations I think can really help you move further forward. So fantastic to see that. We'll be back next week. We've got another Founders Focus to finish off the year. This is with Christian Payne, founder of Talentia. We'll be back on Friday, Breakthrough Lab on air, where we'll be talking about the psychology of recruitment redundancy. So in other words, if you're a recruiter that has been made redundant, tons of practical help out there, but what is going on in terms of psychological help? What is the journey that you can expect to experience at that level? We've got some psychology help for you on Friday, so make sure you join us for that. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody.